You know, for the longest time, we all pretty much believed that our brains were, well, fixed. That after a certain age, you were just stuck with what you had. But it turns out, one of the biggest discoveries in modern science proves that's completely wrong. Your brain can and does change throughout your entire life. And today, we're going to dive into exactly how that works. You know that feeling, right? You decide to learn a new language or maybe pick up the guitar, and at first it's exciting, but then you hit a wall. You practice, and it just feels like you're not getting anywhere. Well, believe it or not, the science behind that feeling is pretty mind-blowing. And that science, it has a name: neuroplasticity. And understanding this one concept is going to help us flip some very old and very wrong ideas about our minds completely on their head. So let's get this straight. The old myth, the one we all kind of grew up hearing, was that the adult brain was basically set in stone. The only changes happening were bad ones, like losing cells as you got older. But now we know that's just not true at all. The truth is, your brain is constantly, actively being rewired by everything you do. This incredible ability is what scientists call neuroplasticity. At its core, it's simply the brain's ability to reorganize itself, to change its very structure and function based on what you experience. It's not just a cool idea, it's a physical process happening inside your skull right now. And this is the part that you really need to let sink in. Learning isn't some abstract thing happening in the ether. Every single time you learn a new fact or master a new skill, you are creating real, tangible changes in your brain. You are literally building a different brain. Okay, so if our brains are being physically reshaped by learning, what does that even look like? Let's pull back the curtain and get into the actual science of how this all works. What is actually happening on a biological level when you finally nail that tricky guitar chord or a complex idea finally clicks? Well, a leading brain researcher, Dr. Laura Boyd, says it basically boils down to 3 fundamental types of change. It all starts with chemical changes, which are super fast. Then it can lead to more permanent structural changes. And finally, it can involve functional changes, where whole areas of your brain kind of shift how they work together. Let's break those down. First up, chemical changes. Think of these as a short-term boost. To help you learn, your brain can quickly flood the gaps between its cells with signaling chemicals. It's kind of like hitting a turbo button. It makes the connections between neurons stronger, which is why you can see improvements really, really fast. Imagine it's your first day trying to play a simple song on the piano. You practice for an hour, and by the end of it, you're thinking, yes, I've totally got this. That feeling of sudden progress, that's all thanks to those quick-acting chemical changes. But then you come back the next morning, sit down at the piano, and poof, it's gone. You feel clumsy again. You're wondering, wait a minute, where did it go? Well, those chemical boosts were only temporary. They wore off because you hadn't yet built anything more permanent. And that's where structural change comes in. This is the slower, more difficult process of physically altering the connections between your brain cells, basically paving a stronger, more efficient road for that skill. This is what builds long-term memory, but it takes consistent time and practice. And we have amazing real-world proof of this. To get a license, taxi drivers in London have to memorize an insanely complex map of 25,000 streets. And, as Dr. Boyd points out in this quote, studies show this intense training physically enlarges the part of their brain responsible for spatial memory. It's a perfect example of practice creating real structural change. And finally, there are functional changes. The more you use a specific brain region, the more, well, excitable it gets. It becomes easier and easier to activate that network of cells. Your brain literally gets more efficient at the things you do often, shifting how its resources are used. So, we know the brain changes in these 3 ways, but what's the trigger? What is it that actually flips the switch and makes all this happen? And this gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? If we're all walking around with these amazingly adaptable brains, why is learning something new still so darn hard sometimes? Why isn't it just easy? Well, the answer is both incredibly simple and maybe a little frustrating. The single best, and really the only, driver of neuroplastic change is your behavior. There's no magic pill, no special trick. You have to do the work. What you do and what you practice is what shapes your brain. This leads to a really wild idea from Dr. Boyd's research. That feeling of struggle, of making mistakes, getting frustrated, and trying again, that's not a sign you're failing. It's the opposite. As she says, that increased struggle is the very signal that tells your brain it needs to make deep, lasting structural changes. Effort is the key ingredient.
But here is the critical warning. This process doesn't care if a habit is good or bad. It works for the positive stuff, but it also works for the negative. Every time you repeat a bad habit, you are physically strengthening the pathways for that habit in your brain, making it even harder to break. Neuroplasticity can work against you just as easily as it works for you.
Okay, so this brings us to the final, and honestly, the most empowering idea of all. Since your behavior, both good and bad, is what drives all this change, it means you have a direct say in how your brain develops. You're in the driver's seat.
You've probably heard of that 10,000-hour rule that you just need to put in the time. But the reality is, every single brain is unique. The recipe for learning that works for your friend might not work for you at all. Because our brains are all wired a little differently, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. So, the big takeaway here is to become a scientist of your own learning process. Pay attention to what actually helps you learn best. Then, consciously repeat those healthy behaviors and actively work to break the ones that hold you back. It's about finding and doing the specific work that your unique brain requires to change. And that leaves us with this powerful final thought from Dr. Boyd. Your brain is not fixed. Everything you do and everything you don't do is shaping it. You are the architect. So the real question is, what kind of brain do you want to build?